This is the
BrighterSpectrumPodcast,
where we illuminate the world of parenting children with autism. I'm CJ, a proud dad to a wonderful 6-year-old with autism. Through my journey, I've discovered the challenges, triumphs, and unique experiences that come with raising a child on the spectrum. Inspired by those experiences, I created this space where parents like you can find understanding, share stories, and learn from each other. Join me as we explore insights, strategies, and support, all while celebrating the brighter spectrum of our children's lives. Now, let's dive in and cast light on this path together. Talking with me today is John Fela. He's a special needs dad, national advocate, and speaker focused on working with other dads who may not have a great support system at home. Leaning heavily on his Christian faith for guidance, he's overcome several challenges and brings his experience with him for this episode. John, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this. Not a whole lot of people know, but I had a previous show where we talked heavily about like spirituality and the path and all that, and finding the inner truths and the higher self. And so it's kind of cool that we're able to bring this aspect in with us today. And it's just, I feel like it's really important for people to I don't know, like be kind of like open to different concepts.
Yeah, no, and I totally get where you're coming from there. And what I will tell you is that, just kind of in a nutshell, my experience is that I've kind of had a very unique spiritual journey. I've walked many paths myself. I do identify as a Christian now. That was not something that just happened. Well, I guess in some ways it kind of happened overnight, but it was also something that was heavily fueled by my son's disability. And I will honestly tell you that if my son did not have a disability, I don't know that is exactly where I would have wound up. It's possible, but I know for sure that his disability, walking that journey as a special needs dad and parent, absolutely led me in that direction. So, and without that, I don't necessarily know where I'd be, quite literally. So,
I actually hear you there. I have a similar experience when it comes to spirituality and that aspect too. But, let's kind of like dive in. I really like to start episodes off just talking about like our kids in specific, and, like their journey up until they are now, like how old they are, just kind of give us your story.
yeah, for sure. So I am the parent of one child with a disability. My son, Christopher, or Chris, is 16. He has autism. And when I say autism, it's fairly severe autism in the sense that he will never be independent, as well as being nonverbal. I am divorced from Chris's mom. His mom and I were married for 15 years. I'm recently remarried, like literally within the last couple of months. So Chris has a stepmom now as well. And
well, congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I got that going for me too. But yeah, so I will say that Chris's experience and my experience raising him really was one of, in some ways, it's pretty typical, I guess, or maybe kind of the generic experience I think a lot of parents like us, would speak to, which is you start out with questions. My child is not developing, to what I consider the norm, based on the milestones, whatever the pediatrician is kind of guiding you to do. In terms of myself and his mom, we actually were both teachers. We were in education. She's still a teacher. I left teaching a couple of years ago for my current nonprofit job. But you don't really know what you don't know, right? In terms of it being your first child and everything. And, I remember even still going to the pediatrician the first time for his 18-month checkup, and her asking us questions about, is he speaking? Is he doing this? Is he doing that? And at the end of that, when we explained we're not seeing a lot of this stuff, she basically just told us to go across the street to the professional building, go see the speech therapist, because the speech therapist will play with him and make him talk. And so that's how these kind of conversations get started. So you go through the process of seeing various therapists, doing a variety of testing, seeing different folks, for different issues in terms of PT, OT, that kind of thing. And inevitably, it turned out that we went to see a neuropsych at about the age of 3, and he was diagnosed at the time with what was called a pervasive developmental disorder, PDD, which no longer exists. It's all just autism. It's all just under the autism umbrella. So he's essentially autistic. I will tell you that we've done just about every therapy out there. If it exists, we've either tried it or looked at it, whether it's kind of your more traditional speech, OT or PT, to doing things like your equine therapy, like your horseback riding for, some of the motor skills. He's done, karate with a special needs instructor. He's done swimming with a special needs coach, a Special Olympics coach. He's done speech therapy in a pool, actually, believe it or not, because we found water's a great motivator for him. So we've literally thrown everything at him, as well as he was in a public school in a really strong special ed classroom environment. We had tried some private school experiences, especially since I have a background in some of those. None of it was a really good fit. Had a great experience in public school, but what's certainly kind of challenging and heartbreaking now for us is that his experience last year, this academic year that just finished, where he was a sophomore in his local high school, was actually very rough, and it was challenging for a lot of reasons. And we think some of that might be due to the school environment, but certainly not everything. And long story short, we had to make a choice to find a different placement for him. We initially looked at placements that were local to us in terms of the area geographically. When nothing was a fit for different reasons, we decided to move him to a residential day school facility in Wichita, Kansas. And so we actually just completed that process in June. And so he has been there for a little over a month now. And I will tell you that he's thriving and he's doing very well. It's certainly not the first choice we wanted to make, that I wanted to make as a parent, but in the end, it was the right choice for him. But it's not any less heartbreaking, that your son is, however many, 800 miles away or whatever it is, kind of a thing, from Chicago. So you're grateful for the opportunity there, but it also pains your heart that you couldn't make it work any other way.
Wow. Yeah. I can't imagine. I have a tough time. So it's, we actually have a lot of, singularities here where, I also was with my ex for 15 years and we split, and like my son helped me, find my spiritual path as well. And, he's not quite as, nonverbal. Speech therapy has done wonders for him. I can have little miniature conversations. But I do see in a lot of the Facebook groups, people talk about doing these residential programs with kids who are, you know, um, far higher on the spectrum than some of the lower end kids being affected. And I can't imagine the absolute just mental roller coaster you went through to come to the decision that that's what was best for him. Do you want to maybe kind of get in a little deeper about that for some of the other parents who are listening to this who might be considering the same option?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, what I want to say is that um, one of the biggest challenges with our son is that, of course, he's nonverbal. So because of that communication issue, now he does have an iPad, he does have Touch Chat, which is the particular communication app we use. I know that there's others out there, but the problem is that he can't necessarily tell us what's going on inside. And we had been warned and cautioned by a lot of folks for years that, once they hit their teenage years, once they hit puberty, once the hormones start to rage, then you're going to see some different things you did not expect. I would tell you that my son is probably one of the sweetest guys you'll ever meet, not aggressive, not a guy who has tantrums or meltdowns. I think he's had a little bit of that in his time. But we got to a point where he started to get aggressive and actually going after school staff. He was biting, hitting, scratching, that type of thing. And he was also going after mom and dad as well. And it got to the point where we said, okay, well, we need to take him in now. Both of our instincts were telling us that, at least initially, this is probably a GI related issue, as most of our parents and families especially of autism, will know that a lot of our kids have GI issues for a whole variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
While my
Mine's
son
going
doesn't
through
have,
it right now himself.
Yeah. So you get it, and certainly we've got food allergies and things. In his case, they're mild, but obviously there's things he probably shouldn't eat or eat as much of. Let's say. So we take him to the emergency room of a hospital. It's actually a pediatric emergency room, pediatric hospital where he's had some other procedures done in the past. They did a an X-ray, and they found that, well, yeah, his large intestine was blocked. And now again, here's the thing. One of these throwaway lines that you always hear, either whether, and again, I'm coming from an education standpoint or a parenting standpoint, they always say that, well, all behavior is communication. Well, you know what? It sure is, because my kid couldn't tell us any other way that he had to poop and he couldn't. So he just decided to start biting, scratching, hitting. And luckily, mom and I were able to figure out, let's start here and then let's see where it goes. So that was probably the initial tell that something was happening. But then the issue was that, the behaviors didn't necessarily go away. Did they start to even out? Sure. However, the other thing is, my son, probably like a lot of folks listening to this, is on a variety of medications for some different things. Uh, Another story that I won't get too deep into right now, but he actually did need to have brain surgery, which I know sounds serious. It actually
Mm,
wasn't as bad as it sounds. It was what's called a decompression surgery, because there was an abnormality with his brain and his skull, kind of a thing. But because of that, it was causing seizures. So he was on anti-seizure meds. So we had to look at the seizure meds he was taking. And then, of course, there were mood stabilizers, for some of the behaviors. He had been on some ADHD stuff because of the focus in school, this type of thing. But now we were trying some different mood stabilizers, and with all of this different mix of these different approaches, with the medications, we didn't know exactly if something was causing something, and we just weren't aware of it. And this is information we had gotten actually from other families to say, this medication actually can cause aggression. Maybe you want to look at trying something different, for example. So it took a while to get that right combination. However, then what was going on was he was still having the outbursts, and the school, unfortunately, was basically their response was, listen, we're going to do our best, but if we cannot control him, and if he's being a danger to staff and students, we're going to ask you to just pick him up. Well, that sounds easy enough, but when you are two working adults that have jobs, full-time jobs that you use to support yourself and your kid, you just can't drop everything and say, I'm going to go pick him up. So
right,
we
right.
we worked that out for a little bit, and then we said, this is not tenable long term. And then working with the school, and then getting, of course, some advice from some folks, outside advocates, that type of thing. We said, well, one, the school needs to have a safety plan in place, and then follow this protocol. And then, if worst case scenario, last choice is, call us and then we'll get them. But then, the conversation started, maybe it's a different placement, and again, maybe something that would assess his academic needs. Because here's the other problem too: if we're spending all of this time redirecting his behavior, he's not learning, right? And again, we also realize that, again, with the level of his cognitive abilities, no, we don't expect that, he's getting into MIT or something like that. We know that, right?
Right.
But at the same time, there are expectations for whatever he's getting in terms of basic skills, life skills, et cetera. You still want him to be engaged in that environment. So as that process started, we looked at some stuff locally. Some places either didn't have a spot, didn't want to take him, and another thing we were kind of cautioned on was, you even if, let's say, there's a particular organization or a school that will take him, if you are looking to do other things with those folks later on, like in one case, there's an organization that might actually partner with us for a housing option. You don't necessarily want to burn a bridge if, let's say, it's a bad experience and then they say, sorry, we can't take him anymore. So, we had to navigate that whole road. And finally, what we came up with was let's look at some out of state options. And then, of course, the one popped up that he's currently at, and it's called Heart Spring, and I feel comfortable enough to share that. It's called Heart Spring. It's in Wichita, Kansas. And what we learned after the fact, after we started the process, was that it's considered actually one of the top schools and residential and therapeutic day schools for autism in the country, and a lot of people actually go to train there, kind of a thing. And so we had heard nothing but great feedback from parents locally and other therapists that had worked with him, et cetera. So we said, well, this looks like where this is headed. And oh, by the way, they're the only place who really kind of checked all the boxes and gave us all yeses and green lights the whole way. So we said, sure, let's look at it. It was a process of a few months to get the school board, the local school board, or the local school district on board, I should say, that this was a viable option. Legally, the his district is actually paying for him to attend there, because that is part of the special ed law.
Mm.
So, that's awesome. They are covering that tab, and he's getting exactly what he needs in that environment. I will tell you, one of the most challenging and most bittersweet experiences, and I am a writer and I do write blogs and things like that, and I haven't committed this to typing it out yet and getting it in some kind of print form. But eventually, when I do that, I'll do more of a deep dive for those that'll be interested. But the reality is that there was so much that tugged on me emotionally, in terms of, okay, I know this is the best choice, but I'm going to have such a hard time letting him go because, yeah, he's 16. If he was a typical kid, he'd probably be going away to college somewhere or doing something, and, yes, they're away from home because they, do stuff in the summer. And even he goes to away camps during the summer for short times. But the fact is that because of the level of his disability, there's still that part of me as a parent that still sees him as a very young child. And that is something that I've had to work on. Not that I don't think that he is or can be capable of more, but it's this idea of wanting to protect your kids from the world,
Yeah.
wanting to insulate them. The world's a scary place. There's mean people out there. There are people who will look down on my kid or say things about him, or there are people who will cut him in line or do this or that. And my kid literally does not have a voice, literally.
Yeah.
So, you want them to just kind of stay in their bubble. I mean, yeah, I want him to, maybe he'll get a job, maybe, he'll live on his own, or at least, in some kind of a supportive environment. And, yeah, I won't necessarily see him every day, and that's a good thing. But to have him that far away, as good as it might be, you still have a hard time. I mean, just briefly, and then I'll finish this thought.
Mm-hmm.
The day we dropped him off, and it was myself, his now stepmom, his biological mom, and then her boyfriend, who she's been with for some time now. So all of us, obviously very close and concerned about him. But when we were leaving, they do the drop off in the morning. The family stays. You do meetings with all the staff. You meet everybody. You kind of see how his day's going to go, and then it's kind of a natural transition. You leave at the end, right when you drop, right when he's having dinner. That's when you kind of make your way out. And I remember looking at him sitting there and kind of he was in his group home. So it's maybe, 5, 6 other, folks that are all kind of together. They're having their meal. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, who's going to feed him? Because I'm used to literally, like when I have him, sitting next to him as I always have, assisting him with his meal, whether it's helping him with a fork or, just arranging stuff or whatever. And here he is, and he's just kind of sitting there and he's figuring it out. But I'm just like, I got to feed him. I can't leave. I got to feed him. And then, of course, it pops in my head. No, dude, you got to go. You have to leave because that's what's best for everybody. Right now, you need to leave. And that's one of the hardest things, is to make yourself leave your kid when you want to believe it's all going to be okay, but you don't really know. And how can he ever really tell you, again, because he can't communicate?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of faith and that's the kind of courage you have to have in a situation like that, making that walk from that group home to your car and just saying goodbye. It's probably one of the toughest things I've ever done.
Oh my God. I would have been an emotional mess. I couldn't imagine. Yeah, it takes a lot of that. I'll tell you, that takes a lot of courage, man, to recognize what is best for him, and being able to set aside like your own personal. I mean, at that point, that's like an emotional need for yourself too, right? Like, that's my baby, that's my little boy, like, and then being able to do that thing for him. That's got to be one of the bravest things I've ever heard.
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, and I acknowledge that statement. And you know, um, I've definitely had probably a few of those experiences, like a lot of parents, in our deal have. Um, but at the end of the day, I've also been reminded that, at least from where I'm coming from, and again, coming from the perspective of my current faith, there are no accidents in life. And, this is exactly where he needed to be. And, for everything to just kind of match up the way it did, you come to these crossroads in life. And again, with our kids, again, and I don't personally know it from the standpoint of having typical kids, because he's my only, of just being able to say, yeah, you're old enough, you'll be fine. You know what you're doing, or I've parented you well. You know how to advocate for yourself. You know how to communicate. You need something. This is what you do. There's none of that here.
Right.
I mean, in a very basic sense, if he can find the right buttons on his iPad, but that's still in a very basic sense. And so at the end of the day, it's, I have to do what's right by him. And sometimes, like, for any of our typical kids, that is something where you just say, I got to let him go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard, man. That's some serious emotional self-sacrifice. That's wow. And you said he's doing great and everything. I'm sure a lot of people right now, after hearing all this, are wondering, like, how often do you get to see him?
Yeah, and that's a great that's a great question. And believe it or not, I'm actually going to be seeing him this weekend. So I'll be going out this weekend. We'll be doing our first visit since the drop off. Initially, they tell you that they only want to go about like first 30 days. Don't visit, let him acclimate, and then when we come out this weekend, we'll go out on Friday and we'll come back Sunday, and it'll be stay with him, let's say a couple hours on Friday and visit, and then on Saturday, you can visit him for a few hours on campus, or if you want to take him off, that's fine. I'm actually still waiting to get the all clear if we can actually keep him for like an overnight at the hotel kind of thing or not. We'll see. But it could be something where we just spend most of the day with him Saturday and then drop him off and then leave Sunday. So it'll be like a day and a half kind of a deal.
Okay.
And between him and between myself and stepmom and his mom, we kind of flip flop it. So, I'll see him this month. I might not see him in August, but then I'll see him again in, whatever, September and October kind of a thing. So, and then otherwise we do Zoom calls, we do something with him where the staff will put him on the iPad every few days, and you can,
Okay.
just
Yeah, I was
kind
just
of.
about to ask about that, if there was any like video call option.
Yeah. So they will do that. And to be honest with you, it's just as simple as you call the main phone number for the group home. They pick up and they send you a link. And then as long as there's nothing else crazy going on with his day, as far as you have to call it kind of the right time. We actually learned that it's hard because he actually does a full school day there, then goes to the group home, then they do whatever activities they're doing and eating and stuff like that, and then he has to get ready for bed. And so sometimes it's easier to just wait until all that crazy is done, and then you can talk. So we kind of figured that out at this point. So yeah, so we do that, and we send them a care package, just like camp, like a week or two ago, with some snacks and just some other treats and that kind of thing too. So it's basically like it's like college, right? It's like the
Hmm.
same way you might support your kid at college. I mean, it's probably more camp than college, because you're a little bit more on top of them, or as far as like making sure that everything is okay and he's got what he needs. Because again, there's the communication piece. But to be honest with you, like I think it's been great. We've got nothing but good feedback, and honestly, if it makes a difference in his life, if he comes back, maybe a more well-adjusted, adult, or someone who maybe can cope a little more with some of these things, and maybe learn some of those tools and skills, then great. I can't be upset about that. But it hurts that it's got to be so far away physically, kind of a thing. And that's where I've definitely had some of those moments, quite honestly, where I've had to break down and cry, because one, I knew I was going to miss him that bad, and two, you also start to have all of these regrets about, could we have done something different? Could we have done something better? Could I have made the time with them more meaningful? And you second guess yourself as a parent. And at the end of the day, you just got to let all that go and say, this is just where it's at. And you know what? It's going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's just, like I said before, man, that's like some of the most courageous lines of thoughts, because it's got to be the hardest thing in the world to be able to come to that decision and be like, well, this is what's for the best and this is what I need to do. So that's amazing. And, kudos to you, because there's a lot of us that I don't know if we'd be able to do that, even though, like, these are your kids and you always do what's best for them. Like, some of us, have those emotional attachments, and we may not be able to, like, make ourselves do that. Not necessarily for directly selfish means, but foundationally selfish. Um, not saying that in a negative way, just saying, like, some people aren't able to emotionally get past that barrier. So that's amazing. I don't even know if I'd be able to do that. Fortunately, I'm not in that position, but wow. And I'm kind of like getting into this now, like, we've kind of got the background on your son and everything, the things you went through, and kind of like now I'm kind of getting into that emotional range and whatnot. So, what was that like for you personally? Like, from, what did you go through as a parent, and like what went through your head? And like, I see lots of stuff online where people are saying things like, "Oh, I don't have a social life anymore," and things like that. And I'm always torn on those processes that people go through, because at times, there were times in my life where my son's only 6, and I've been like, man, I wish I could still do this kind of thing. But like, at the same time, I'm like, well, I'm glad that I have to include my son in everything, because my dad didn't include me in nothing growing up. So it's
Mhm.
nice that this person needs me on that level. And I can say, well, I need to bring my son. So, you know, it is like an up and down, and sort of, and like, and sometimes like, I remember feeling certain kinds of ways and then feeling guilty for feeling those ways later. And I was just kind of like wondering, what was it like for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so this is usually where I like to talk about why in terms of my advocacy and how I see support. My kind of niche, my kind of focus is working with men and working with dads. Now, here's the thing. I am absolutely all about supporting parents and families. And we have a lot of, just like my own son, his biological mom is like the stereotypical autism mama bear. Like, there isn't like any details she misses. She's on top of everything. She's organized. She's got it together. Just what I've described in terms of this move to the school, I mean, she was on top of most of that. She was the one that was organizing things and whatever, and that's her gifting, that's her talent, and you got to let that go. But here's what happened to me, and this is how I relate my story. So when he first got his diagnosis, again, we're talking about 3-ish, but even before that, you knew that there was something going on. What happened was and again, based on conversations I have with moms and dads, and this is all over, right? This is all over the country. What happened was mom jumped into mom mode, and mom did exactly what mom was trained to do, knew to do. And again, in my son's case, his mom's excellent at this. She was the one who found all of the doctors, the therapists, worked with the insurance company, managed the schedule. Where is he going? What does he need? All of that. She was very good at it, but also a very type A personality, and a little controlling with it, right? So the reality of it was, I knew, okay, that this is her thing, this is her lane. I'm not going to complicate that. If she needs me to do something, okay. But the reality was that I didn't really help with that, other than if she said, I can you do this, can you do that? And that wasn't because I was lazy. It was because it was so intimidating for me. It was intimidating because, first of all, it just is, because you're realizing your child has challenges. And what does this mean? And will he outgrow this, or are we talking about the rest of his life here? Right. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, but more specifically as a guy. And again, this is something that I hear all the time. Most men in a situation like this, their kind of gut default reaction or response is, I'm going to work. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to provide. I'm going to make all this money to cover all these things, right? And mom will handle all the details. And that's how a lot of families work. Now, that's not a judgment. That's fine, right? Here was my problem. I was not the breadwinner. I was never the breadwinner in my family. I never made the most money. My wife always made more than me. And on top of that, I actually married into a relatively wealthy family. So her mom, my mother-in-law, was also very involved in terms of, and again, very generous and very supportive. But again, it was, she was very involved because she had her own opinions on things based on her life experience. And then my wife was managing things. So I was kind of the odd man out. And it really became a conversation about, okay, so who am I? What do I do? And I'll tell you, and again, this kind of leads into my faith story a little bit because, I got to a point where, we were going through a real rough season of life in 2012. I had a job loss. So that really put more of the onus on me as far as, wow, now I'm really not contributing much here. And, our marriage was suffering, and there were a lot of things that went into that. But, basically our family was just being torn apart, and it was so much stuff on so many levels. And I'm very open about the fact that I got to a point where, I sat in front of my computer one day and I typed out 3 letters. And one was to my mom, one was to my kid, one was to my wife, and they were all suicide notes. And I'm very transparent about that. And when I speak at conferences around the country and I tell my story, with some of the presentations I do, I'm very open about that. That's where I was.
Mhm.
And it was, again, as I say, by the grace of God and through my faith, that I was able to connect with guys that spoke into my life. They weren't all special needs dads either, but they were just guys that cared, guys that would, kind of be there for me. I could talk to them. They would support me. What do you need? How can we help you? Obviously there's prayer involved in that, in that environment. But, it was the fact that I had to relearn what my value was. So again, from a faith perspective, my value is just that, I'm created by God in his image and I'm his son, and that's it, right? That my value begins and ends there. But I am still operating in this dynamic of being a parent of a special needs son and married to, my wife, his mom. So how do I show up in this marriage? So I had to relearn that. So first of all, again, I had to learn that my value was not tied to how much money I made. And that's a big message that I share with special needs dads when I talk to them all around the country. Your value is not your checkbook. You've got to stop believing that, because at the end of the day, and especially in the environment we're living in now with the economy and whatnot, the reality is that, we're all squeezed on a lot of levels, regardless of how much we're making. So you can't tie your value to that. And at the end of the day, if you're not emotionally invested in your child, because there are dads, and again, sometimes this is specific to a culture or maybe how a dad was raised, but there's a lot of shame that gets attached. There's a lot of shame that gets attached because you have a child with a disability. So what, my kid is never going to play sports like I want him to. They're never going to do the travel baseball or the travel hockey. Man, I really like golfing. I wanted to go golfing with my kid or fishing. Well, they're never going to do that. So now what? So, there's a part of men that they shut off emotionally and they don't try to connect with their kid, or it just becomes a chore, or it becomes caregiving. And I will tell you that that's one challenge that I've had with my son, probably now in his older years, is that a lot of times as a dad, I would almost feel like a caregiver or a caretaker than a parent, because I'm always trying to meet his needs. And now that he's older, when they're young, they have needs, but now that he's older, it's a little more pronounced because you're taking care of an adult essentially and not a kid. It is a different thing. So, I still do have that struggle that I identify with, but the reality was that, look, if I'm not the breadwinner, if I'm not handling the calendar, if I'm not handling the insurance and the therapies, okay, what do I do? Well, I realized my gifting was in networking, relationships, meeting people. So that's what I leaned into. And I was the guy, and I'm still the guy who goes out and meets the people and the organizations and finds out about this whatever they're doing at this and that whether it's a therapy or a new residential model or whatever. I'm the guy that's out there doing that because of the advocacy that I developed over these last several years. So now the way that my his mom and I parent is, she's the detail person. She's the one who has, she's over all of the medical stuff and the therapy and everything, and that's great. That's what she does. She's good at it. We leave her in her lane, and my lane is the big picture. Okay, well, you know what? As we're looking at some of these options, just like we did this last year, I can tell her, look, I'm going to tell you that this place is a hard no. This place here is a maybe. And then if we're looking at some other places, if I don't know anything about them, let me talk to my people. Let me see what I hear. And even in the case of where he is now, I didn't know anybody specifically that had an experience at that place, but, I do know people who, work in that, like, around the school geographically in that area that are partners of mine that I could at least ask, do you know anything about? And they said, we don't know anything in terms of specifics, but we do know it's got a great reputation. Okay, that's fine. I trust you guys. That's at least something. So the idea here, again, going back to my original point, is a lot of marriages, and I'm not going to quote you the number because everybody quotes that number out there and it's maybe never really accurate. But the reality is that marriages where disability is present, the divorce rate is astronomical, right? It is definitely higher than whatever the typical average is. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I am a product of that now too myself. So I can speak to that. But a lot of it is because you get squeezed on so many levels. If you've got problems already in the marriage, those are going to get exacerbated. You need to be working on your marriage. You need to be going to therapy. You need to be talking to someone. Even if you don't think you're having problems, you need someone to talk to because you need to make sure you're doing the maintenance, the work on the marriage kind of thing. You need to make sure you're doing the date nights. You need to make sure that you're spending time together. And it's the conversations are not just about your kid. You've got to have conversations about things that have nothing to do with that, where you're just talking about something casual, things that you enjoy doing together, whatever it is, right? But if you're not going to be intentional with that, and then also if you're not going to be intentional with your child, I made the point about a lot of dads, they separate, especially if it's a male child, because they have expectations about they're going to do this or that. I say, listen, like my kid, for example, my kid loves sports. He loves watching sports on TV. We used to have a basketball hoop in the driveway, or, whenever we go to the gym, depending on, if it's at, our old church, whatever, wherever we're at, if there's a ball and a hoop, yeah, he likes watching me do it, and he gets excited. I pass it to him, he doesn't have the motor skills to really shoot it, but he can pass it. He can bounce it a little. Okay, great. That's us having that time together. It's got nothing to do with his ability. It's just the connection piece. So, okay, I can see he likes it. So what are ways we can, get him to enjoy it and let's have that father-son time. It's not going to look like how everybody else is. And that's okay. What matters is you're connecting. Because if you don't have that, well, then it's not even really parenting anymore. Then it does become caregiving, and then that's where that relationship with your child is damaged, and ultimately it damages the marriage, and that's where you see a lot of these things fall apart.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And on a previous episode, I sat down with my friend David, who was a step parent to an autistic child. And coming into that child's life, he kind of thought like, well, this is just going to be coming into a kid's life. I'm going to be, a father figure, and found out that like, well, this is a lot more intense than just becoming part of a kid's life, like creating that understanding and trying to generate that bond with them and everything was a whole different ball game than most people experience when entering into that whole like step parent position. And like you said, it actually inevitably ruined his relationship too. Um, well, that's actually episode 2 of the series here, And it really is. It does take a phenomenal toll on the relationship if not everybody's on the same page, or if somebody is less patient than another person, or you know people are coming at it with, well, I've been a parent to this child for this long and it's not that hard. It's like, well, you've been doing it for this long, this person hasn't. Everybody needs patience, and not everybody's able to kind of come eye to eye and meet on the same level with that.
Yeah, right. And it goes back to that point I make about, you have to know who you are, you have to know what your role is, and you have to be honest. Like, look, there may be some things you're not good at, whether it's your biological child that you're learning how to raise and something comes up, or even like, if you are a step parent, so my son's stepmom, where I'm a little bit lucky is, one, she's a nurse. But two, she's volunteered with the current organization that I work for, which is a Christian nonprofit that supports disability, and she's volunteered with us for years. That's actually how I met her. And so she has a heart for this. She has an awareness of it. She has an understanding. She hasn't parented a child like this, but she's there's a lot of tools and skills she brings. So again, it's a matter of, okay, what can I bring to the table here? And how do I make this work? And again, it's not an impossible thing. Really the biggest thing is just having the heart for it, and the want to make it work, and figuring out what it's going to look like. And at the end of the day, we all just want what's best for a kid, right? I want
Mhm.
what's best for my son. I have to surrender that he's 800 miles away for right now. Or, for example, that he's got his stepmom, which is great, but eventually he's probably going to have a stepdad. Okay, well, guess what? I have to assume that that's all going to work out too. It's not what I saw, 15, 20 years ago, but it is my reality. And
Yeah.
I need to choose how I'm going to engage that reality. And ultimately, it's about what's best for him. It has nothing to do with my feelings or emotions about it. It's what is best for him. And the rest of it, I can just put on a shelf, and I can deal with it. I've learned a lot of great ways to deal with it, but that's my responsibility. That's on me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The synchronicities between us just continue, man, because the woman I'm currently with, she's also a nurse, and we're working on that coming together, that moving in together situation, and figuring out. And right now, our plan is like, we have different levels of the house that she owns, and everybody's gonna have like space. So like, if she needs to be separate from him to kind of like cool down, like she's able to get that space, so that or even him on that matter of like getting used to being in a new environment. That's one of the strategies we're using. Uh, but to digress from that a little bit, you brought up the whole kind of accepting that he's going to have a stepdad part, and I'm also in that boat as well. And I feel like I'm approaching that with a decent level of maturity and acceptance. Like I just last Father's Day wished his stepdad to be, Happy Father's Day, and he kind of looked at me weird, and I was like, well, you're sort of a dad now, dude. And just trying to be that sort of role model, that sort of level of acceptance, that's what's best for my son. But I know emotionally and like on the inside, it's very difficult to accept that. Well, I mean, if he was like even just like a neurotypical kid, it's hard for a dad to accept that there's going to be another man who's going to be a father figure in their lives, let alone now you have this is your baby, and there it's not the same, and you feel even more protective over them than a lot of people really would. And what would you say to other guys who like us are in that situation where we have to accept that this stepfather is coming into their lives?
Yeah, and allow me to also be as transparent as I can be here on this topic, and I could probably do a whole other show on it. So I'm not gonna bring in all of the background here, but um, I'll be completely honest and tell you that it hasn't necessarily been easy for me, and there's some different reasons for that. It wasn't so much that, so just for some disclosure here, so in terms of my son's mom and I divorcing, she really asked for that. It wasn't like a mutual, hey, I don't think this is working. Let's just get divorced. She literally just handed me papers out of the blue one day, and we
Ooh.
weren't fighting. There was no, I certainly wasn't cheating on her or anything. There's no drugs. There's no gambling, nothing. It's just, I don't love you anymore. Okay, well, I can't make you love me. So
Well, that's
it
almost
it is,
worse.
yeah, right. It wasn't, it really, and again, I could probably at least do one other episode on all that, but it was one of these things where, okay, you don't love me, fine, but I know you love our kid. Let's just be great co-parents. This other guy came into the picture. I didn't necessarily care for the way some things were handled, and it was probably more on my ex than him, quite honestly. But I don't really know. But what I had to kind of come to terms with was, okay, if I legitimately have an issue that affects my son or my relationship with him, fine. Anything that she does, she's an adult. I have to surrender control of, okay, it might not be the choice I'd make for my life or whatever, or I might disagree with it. That's got nothing to do with me. How does it affect my kid? So that's really where I try to keep it objective. What is interesting though is, and again, kind of floating around some recent life changes for me, because again, I've certainly moved on. I've met someone. I'm now, freshly remarried and all of that kind of stuff. And here's a thing that, I think as guys, we have to just kind of come to terms with. And again, I'll also be honest and say, look, I'm a pretty emotional guy. Not emotional in the sense that I fly off the handle, but I feel my feelings. I've got no problem with that. I've done a lot of different, counseling and therapy over the years for all kinds of stuff. And so I can be honest about that. I have no problem with sharing. And to your point about having someone else around your son, I never saw another guy around my son, not in this context. I'm like, so that does freak me out a little. But again, it's about her relationship, and you got to keep those boundaries and understand, as long as your son's fine, it's okay. But what's interesting too is, with all those emotions and feelings and concerns, at the end of the day, you have to realize that this is a person that my ex may wind up marrying and being with the rest of her life. And then guess what? That means he's in your kid's life, the rest of their life, and et cetera, and your life, quite honestly. So what are you going to do? You kind of have to just step up to the plate there a little bit, using the old analogy. But what was interesting is, and I'll just tell you the story briefly. So when I told my ex that we were getting married, and again, she, on the surface, she's super excited, and that's great, and happy for you guys and all that. What was funny was, so and this is something that I think a lot of parents on here can probably relate to. So because of my son's challenges, whenever Mother's Day comes up, or Father's Day, or Christmas, birthdays, whatever, right? You literally have to go pick out the cards and the gifts for your kid. It's not your kid. Like, my kid can't pick out a card or something. I go to the
Right.
store, I pick out the card, I pick out the gift. I help him to sign the card, but ultimately I'm the one doing the work. And that still kind of has a little bit of a bite to it, but whatever, over time it gets easier, and it is what it is. So when my now current wife and I got married, and again, this was back in May, um, we had the wedding. We stayed at a hotel, for the weekend. We came home, and then, whatever it was, the day or two after we were home, we were going through a bunch of gifts. So, you go through all the cards, and you go through all the packages, and da da da. We went through all this stuff, and with all of the stuff that we had opened, the first thing that I would reach for, like if there was like a gift bag, it would be like, I would go for the card first. Oh, this is from so and so, great, let's look at what they got us. So for whatever reason, there was a bag where I didn't grab the card first. I just reached into the bag, and I reach into the bag, and I pull out this little kind of, little like metal sculpture. It's like got two hearts, and, it's got a cross in the middle, because, yes, we're Christians. So,
Right.
but it's this little thing with two hearts, and it's like two hearts are becoming one, your wedding day, all this. Okay. I don't know who this is from. So in my head, I'm thinking some nice old lady from the church, or, one of her friends got us this sweet little thing, and oh, isn't that nice? I pull the card out of the bag, and it's from my son, which of course means it's from his mom, my ex. And, she wrote in there a little something and signed the card from him and all that. And right there, I just stopped, because it's moments like that when you realize that as much maybe anger that you have from how things ended, or whatever emotions you're feeling. And in my case, now that I was remarried, I could put a lot of things to bed and like, hey, I've moved on, it's fine. But when I saw that, it took me to a whole other level of forgiveness and acceptance, because she picked that out. She helped him sign the card. And she was basically saying, I'm happy for you guys. And you know what? Here's something that I think you would appreciate. And it wasn't just something it wasn't just another thing of potholders, or, a dish or something. It was something that she actually said, hey, I think, that would be a nice sentiment. So when you have that experience, you say to yourself, okay, you know what? Um, things didn't turn out the way that I thought in my previous marriage. There was definitely some things that I wish could have been handled differently or better. But you know what? I can probably forgive a lot more now, because I know that, you know what, she's legitimately happy. And, whatever, whether it was a big deal for her or not to pick that out, I know the experience of having to pick out the birthday gifts and the holiday gifts, and the Mother's Day and all of that. I know how challenging that can be sometimes. And she actually did that for us for our new marriage. So that to me was saying, like, you know what, okay, you can move past some of these things, and remember that at the end of the day, you're not going to see eye to eye on everything. But you know what? She's still your child's mom, and she's going to be with you for the rest of your life and with him. And you know what? If it's truly about your kid, then make it about your kid, and put all the other things to the side.
Yeah, man. That's fantastic advice. And honestly, I do the Mother's Day cards and whatnot. I don't really do like the gift thing so much. He doesn't really seem interested in like the gift aspect, but he does like picking out cards. So I kind of do that. It's at this point in time, it's not really reciprocated, but you know, autism or not, these kids are watching, and someone has to set an example, right? So we uh we kind of we're at that stage right now, and you know, your story there is just it helps give people a little bit of hope, kind of going in that direction. And I hope that, as co-parents, that his mother and I can get on that same level that you just talked about at some point. um but we're getting close to that hour mark. This has actually been like a really positive episode. I do get quite a bit of like well, I'd say like a healthy mix of negative, a mix of negative and positive. But I do like to end the discussion talking about, what would you say be like the top 1 to 3 things, victories for your son in his development, and then maybe like what's the biggest victory for you as a father to an autistic child?
So I would tell you, biggest victories for my son. It, he's had he's had a really challenging experience in this mortal body, and that we could say that for a lot of our kids. But I think about the reality of how hard he works, and sometimes I've been to presentations at these conferences and things, and I think I was just at one last month where it was actually a friend of mine who was doing something, and it's this reminder of, do you realize how hard these kids work? I mean, they go to school all day, and then most of them are in some kind of a therapy after school for 3-4 hours almost every day, and then weekends. And I think about all the stuff my son has done, and really he's been really fearless with it. He's taken on all these challenges, whenever there was something new, therapy or an approach or whatever, he just kind of went with it. And so I just want to applaud kind of his courage, and his fortitude, because again, with that lack of communication, I'm sure there were days when he was tired and sick and my head hurts and all that, and he just pushed through, and it's also the fact that I see, especially now, but even the last couple of years when he was doing a particular away camp, and they had like a disability part of the camp, so he was able to get some support. So I just marvel at his independence. Again, I'm kind of the dad's like, but he can't do that. He can't do that. It's like, no, he actually can, or at least he can do enough. And then there's usually somebody there to help him. So just going back to that idea about like sitting and eating, right? It's this idea of, you know what, he'll be okay. It's fine. And I kind of just marvel at that kid now who, like, when he goes to camp, he can't wait to like run on that and jump on that bus to like, he's like, great, we're going somewhere, man. I'm out of here, kind of thing. Like, all right, man, go have fun. Or, he's gonna be okay sitting and eating. Or when I Zoom with him, like he's got a smile on his face and he's always happy, at his current place. So I think it's just him really owning his life and really kind of growing up that way. And I would say for myself, I would say the victory is that I have been blessed and gifted because what I learned early on years ago, from being that dad who struggled to even know what his value was, I learned that the more that you can be there for people and give back, because a lot of times it's all about, well, we have to find stuff, we have to find resources, we have to find things, we got to find people to help us, and yeah, I get that, but the more I found that the more I gave back, the more that I leaned in and figured out what my true skill and talent was in this world, I got so much from it. I've met so many people, so many families. I've had so many cool experiences, met so many interesting people, and now some legitimately lifelong friends, or friends that I would consider that they'll probably be lifelong friends, just because of this world I've been in. That never would have happened had my kid not had a disability. And I don't want to make that about me, because I know it's easy for people to take it that way or maybe hear it like that. But the reality is that um, he gave to me so much more than I ever could have imagined, really by just being him. He didn't even need to do anything. He just showed up. Yes, he showed up with these challenges, but at the end of the day, it made me a better person, made me a better parent, and it gifted me in ways I never would have imagined or expected. So that's what I go with on the hard days, and that's what I kind of remember when I need the remembering.
Wow. That was beautiful. It really was. Um, I'm actually so grateful that I was able to have you on the show today. And, I'm really glad that we were able to do this. And honestly, I'm hoping to have you come back again in the future, if that's something you'd like to do.
Uh, yeah, definitely.
Oh, fantastic. Would you like to take this time now and, plug whatever you'd like, talk about your programs, how people can reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to joke that I'm trying to trademark the name Swiss Army Knife of Disability Advocacy, because I do a little bit of everything. So I got a lot of stuff. I have a day job in disability. So my day job is I work for an organization called Johnny and Friends. It's JONI and Friends. As I briefly referred to earlier, it's a Christian ministry. We are global, and we support people and families with disability worldwide. I work out of our regional Chicago area office in the Midwest. We have a lot of great outreach. One big outreach is our family retreats, where an entire family can go for a week during the summer. We have a retreat center up in Michigan. That's wonderful. And the whole family gets to go. There are a lot of camps for kids and individuals with disabilities, but this literally the whole family gets to go. It doesn't matter how big your family is or who has the disability or ages or anything. So it's a wonderful outreach there. And then specifically, my job is actually to work with churches. So if you are a person that's hearing this, and maybe your family would like the experience of attending a church, but because of your child's disability, you don't think it's possible, or churches don't support it by you, my job is actually to train and empower those churches to develop programs and curriculums and ministries and things for that. So if you're in the Midwest and you'd like to connect, you can just go to Johnny and Friends, JONI and Friends. go to our Illinois page for our Chicago office, and you can get connected with me there. Again, we work all over the country. So even if it's not my area, if you're hearing this in another part of the country, we've probably got an office that serves you. And then even beyond that, I do a lot of advocacy. So I work with a lot of organizations, Christian and not. I do a lot of blogging, speaking, writing. I've got a website. And I should also clarify that, yes, my name is John Fela, but a lot of my content is under my married name. I actually had a different name when I was married. So it's Fela Geller, Felageller. So johnfelageller.com, you can see a lot of my content. I've done a lot of writing, podcasts, video, speaking, etc. Or you can just punch my name into the Google machine, as I like to say. I do work with a lot of, just cool organizations that do disability in general. One last one I will plug that I work very closely with. It's a national organization based in Chicago called Special Fathers Network. Special Fathers Network, which is just for dads. We have a ton of resources for dads. Most of them are virtual and easily accessible online. But if you're a dad out there and you're looking to get some support and connection, and maybe you're just not finding it where you live, or it's hard to meet people for that, look up Special Fathers Network, find out about, again, a lot of the programs we have. We do virtual meetups. We have virtual support groups. You can even get connected with a mentor dad, even if you just want one guy to talk to. And that's usually some of the biggest advice I give. If you're not a guy who wants a group or a big thing or whatever, you don't want to talk to 10 guys, that's fine. But find one. Find one. You need at least one person to talk to. So that's a great way to do that, great opportunity. And again, if you have any questions about any of this, or even again, as I said, if you need one guy to talk to, even if that one guy is me, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect with you in any way I can help. I'd be more than happy.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I'll double down on that and say that I haven't participated in your specific support group, but finding parents who are in the same scenarios and having those conversations. It's one of the big reasons I started this podcast, was so I can have some of those conversations and not feel so alone. And this is probably the 5th episode I've said that in. A lot of us feel alone at first, and just finding a way to not have that feeling is phenomenal, especially for your mental health. So, thank you so much, John, for offering that sort of support in those programs, especially for us dads out here who, like you said previously, we struggle a lot because, we have that sort of provider disposition, and now we're in this sort of have to be like a nurturer at the same time. And then there's always some of us who have to, especially like in my scenario where, sometimes I have to kind of do both roles. So, honestly, I'm going to personally check out some of these programs you mentioned. I'm really, really grateful for having you on the show. And like I said, I'd love to have you back again some other time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love it and would look forward to it for sure.
Fantastic. Hey, thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and, best of luck with everything and with your son and going forward.
That's awesome. Thanks you so much, buddy.
Thank you for tuning in to the Brighter Spectrum Podcast. If you have any comments, questions, or stories to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, feel free to reach out to me at BrighterSpectrumPodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care and keep shining a light on the journey of parenting.
Thank you for listening.